Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and I am trying something new. I am doing my morning walk, and I'm going to talk to you guys. Just something I figured I'd try out and see how it goes. Um, yeah, so since I decided to stop streaming for a bit, still not sure how long, it was sort of interesting, right? The reaction was mixed isn't the right word, because I wouldn't say it was mixed. If anything, there was a lot of support. I was trying mostly to stay offline and not read it and not really pay attention to anything that was happening. But for example, I saw Froden's post and it had like a ton of likes and stuff like that. And immediately, all that support was really nice, but with the way my brain works, all I could think was, I'm letting these people down. Why am I being such a wimp and letting all these people down that really liked the communication and liked everything? And even my wife gave me a hard time, and she was like, why are you quitting? Why are you being such a wuss? Love my wife, by the way. And so I spent some time sort of really thinking about it and compartmentalizing like how I was feeling and why things were the way they were. And what I came to was I realized there's basically two groups of people, three if you think about it. The first group is the people who play TFT and don't know I exist. Great, no problems there. They're just enjoying the game and having fun. There are the people that enjoy what I do and TFT and things like that. And then we'll call them the bad actors. The people that, want to be angry and want to do whatever. And I realized I need to find a way to continue to serve the people that enjoy TFT, but I also need to put up a barrier between myself and the bad actors, because responding and dealing with the bad actors was making me worse at serving the people that benefit from what I do. And so I thought a lot about that. And what I came to was, like I said, creating a barrier around those people so that we could find ways to still give the same content. So for example, with the Twitter posts that I thought were pretty valuable, but I can't really stand posting on Twitter and posting, hey, I'm playing Magic the Gathering and collecting cards now. And then the first response being, Rengar sucks and your set sucks and you should retire. Like, that's kind of weird. So the Discord made sense where it was like, hey, I could place these posts, not have to look at replies, and still offer them to people that wanted them. Makes sense. The other thing I realized about myself as I was thinking about this is if people come at me with a subjective opinion, and a subjective opinion here would be like, I don't enjoy the Street Demon comp. Okay, no problem, right? Like, everyone's going to like and dislike different things. That doesn't bother me. And it's okay if we make something that you don't like. I hate the Garen encounter. Okay, makes sense. I get it. I don't like it in my rank climb either. But what drives me up the wall is when people come and say something to me that is factually untrue. Just like 100% disprovable. And I was thinking about cases like this, right? Like way back in the day in Lobby 2, I would see someone post TFT is dying. And it was like, meanwhile, internally, I'm looking at these graphs where all our numbers are going up. We're really successful. Things are great. And it's like, it would drive me nuts. It'd be like, no, this is factually untrue, right? Another example is when people would post like, this is the worst patch ever. And again, factually untrue. No, there are definitely worse patches we've had in the past. Now, granted, what a high bar, right? We're not the worst. Not really the bar we're aiming for, but still, I find that I don't respond well to things that are factually untrue. And that's when I find myself getting worked up. And so hopefully in recognizing that, I can look at that situation and go, okay, it's time to maybe not worry about when people post something that is factually untrue, and instead just sort of, let them live in ignorance. And so I'm going to be trying to, when that happens, maybe take a deep breath, calmly sort of be like, okay, cool. I mean, you're wrong, but that's okay. And not feel this need to correct things. Because in one of the reasons I started being open in the first place was to provide information and stop the spread of misinformation, right? It's like, you want to make sure that people don't think something is bugged when it isn't, or something works the way it doesn't. And so that was an example where it was like, okay, maybe if I continue to spread this information, there will be less misinformation. But again, I've also said I'm naive sometimes, and my naiveness basically meant that, I thought I could fight some of these bad actors that no matter what I do, will feel the need to, spread that misinformation or say things that are factually untrue. And some of it can come across as ego, right? So for example, one of the things that people will say that is factually untrue is like, your direction is ruining the game. And it's like, again, I'm seeing the numbers. I'm sitting in these meetings where they're saying sets are doing very well, they're very successful, things are great. It's like, then what's the problem? So, like I said, TLDR here is, if I want to re-engage with the community, I need to create barriers so that bad actors aren't, like, I'm not looking at bad actor stuff, One simple example of this is like, there is one community in particular that just has to be full of bad actors, and that's like the subreddits, which is really a shame because I love the concept of the subreddits, and I actually like the mods. I think the mods are really trying to do good things there. But man, just the ability, and like, I can't help myself. It's a personal weakness that I have to read all the comments, all the replies, try to really understand how people feel about the meta. And when I do that, it starts to drive me nuts, right? And this all kind of came to a head with the 14.2 rundown. And it was just like, 14.2 got ruined by essentially a bug, right? The stupid Hollow bug. Bugs happen. They suck. Very annoying, but goddamn. And, it is what it is. We couldn't micropatch it, which really sucked. And it feels bad. But for all of a sudden, again, I've been doing this a long time. And to see people who have been in the TFT community for, since set one, somehow be like, the balance team is clueless, was like, my God, again, factually incorrect. And so it drove me up the wall. And it was sort of like, I could just not do this for a while. But again, going back to it, that's not the point, right? The point is to ignore the bad actors. And so whatever I decide to do moving forward, I want to make sure that I mostly ignore those bad actors. And so one example is like, during streams, I would find myself trying to answer questions while playing a game that requires a lot of decision making. Sorry, I'm on an uphill part. I tend to lose my breath on the uphill parts. I would find myself playing a game, in the middle of a game, trying to, do well while answering a question. And I would find I would give short answers, or not very fulfilling answers. And I need an avenue where I can reply to people who want that extra layer of transparency, but give them good, satisfying answers. And one of those avenues I figured would be these morning walks, where I have lots of time to think and reflect. There, uphill part's done. Lots of time to think and reflect, and I can come on my morning walks and answer a question or three and give good, satisfying, long answers about what's going on. So Yeah. So what I'm thinking right now is I've already started the daily thoughts on the Discord. And so now I'm going to try maybe the walking. And this is the first video of me trying that and seeing how this goes. You'll have to let me know how it is. You'll have to let me know how the video looks and the sound looks. So I'm sure there's lots of room to improve. But one of the things I always enjoyed about doing this as sort of a hobby is that it was a different creative outlet. It was a different project. I liked sort of starting my stream and then going, how can I improve this? How can we gamify it, right? With viewer games. Or working with Gangly on the UI, making that pretty and stuff like that. Or working with the mods to make sure it shows like what portal we're on and things like that. That was fun. And so I'm hoping having a new creative outlet like this would also work, where it's like, cool, I can maybe create these Q&A videos. And again, with the primary purpose of serving the people who genuinely want to learn or have questions or want to talk about TFT and its future, or Riot Games, or anything like that. So this is going to be my attempt at that. Now, as far as the streams go, I'm still figuring out what to do there. I at least want to give it at least the month of May, probably a little longer. Because the other thing is there's a curveball happening at work right now that I need to wait and see how that resolves before I can figure out next steps there. But yeah, so I think that's the majority of the stuff related there. The other thing I'll just say is that, no matter how much good you try to do in this world, no matter who you are, there was a good TikTok I saw of this where it was like, what's it like to be a content creator? And this is not just content creation, but like any creation or any good in the world. And they were like, name your favorite thing. In this case, mine is the video game Chrono Trigger, which, that was perfect, right? I love Chrono Trigger. They're like, now go post a video about how much you love this thing, how much you love Chrono Trigger. No matter what this thing is, someone on the internet will come out and tell you how wrong you are, how much they disagree with you, and how much of a bad person you are. And it's true. It's true. No matter what you do. And like I said, I've been doing this a long time. But yeah. And so that definitely kind of got to me a bit. But I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, why did it get to you now? Right? Like, you've been doing this 5.5 years. Why now? The other side of the equation is stuff that I can't necessarily get into. But it's like, when things at work are going, a little tough. And there are things behind the scenes that were contributing a little bit to burnout. And burnout is one of those things you hear as like a buzzword a lot in the video game industry. But the reality is, when you get to a point where you find yourself not really energized to do a thing, you do a thing worse. And that could be because you're overworking, or you're, just having to do the same thing over and over and not having new outlets or whatever. There's a variety of reasons that burnout can happen. My engineering buddy at Nintendo, for him, it was always, he would work way, way, way too much trying to get our milestones done. And then eventually the boss would like change it completely. And it's like, well, that sucks. And he would feel like all that time was wasted. And that would contribute to his burnout. So definitely a tough thing there. But so a combination of a little bit of burnout. Now, generally, despite how much I work, I've been pretty good at managing my burnout. But I think TFT is the first game that I've been able to just like throw myself at 200%. And so that comes with that side effect that, a little bit of burnout combined with everything else made me a bit more sensitive to things that normally in the past I would have just brushed off, And that's the thing. We're all human. We're all strong at some times and weak at others. And like I said, I'll quote my wife again. Probably shouldn't have been so weak this time. But it's going to allow me a chance to reflect on that and figure out how if I come back, how I can come back stronger and things like that. And I will say, the internet break has been mostly good. I find it's really hard to go from cold turkey, by the way, when you're like doom scrolling Twitter and Reddit, into not looking at it at all. But the few times I peek, there are definitely still those bad actors out there. And it's like, God damn, I need to not be reading this. I really need to not be reading this. Made the right call. So, yeah. Anyway, I could go back and forth on this topic for a bit. The other topic we could talk about for a little bit is patchwork. I mean, normally this would be the day where I would be doing a patch rundown and I would be talking about patch changes and some specifics, why we're doing them, things like that. Now, the patch notes are already done. I've seen Roger's version of it, but there's only so much you can put in patch notes. And even on the patch notes sides, we have to localize those and get those ready pretty early. And so there are changes coming next patch that are like not going to get that full description. And I don't think this patch 14.4, there's anything too major. Everyone data mines and finds the number changes pretty quick. It's the non-number changes that become complicated. So for example, brand, we found an issue with brand. Because if you look at the data changes right now, it's just a light nerf. But there's a change to him that's actually sometimes a pretty large buff, where his projectile, I've talked about this before, what we found was if you put a brand on the board and another brand with a sniper's focus, the brand with the sniper's focus would cast this very long distance. Because the travel speed was a fixed speed, not a fixed time, it would take longer for the long distance fireball to hit. And during that time, when the fireball is out in the air, brand can't do anything, until that fireball lands. So the brand without the sniper's focus would begin auto-attacking first and get back to casting first. Not great. So we fixed that so that all brands' projectile travel times are now the same. And this is basically a buff to any time brand would cast a long-distance fireball. And it's weird because it's again, players only hear, when they hear that, they hear buff or nerf. It helps them simplify and quantify changes down to their most basic level, where it's time to, buff or nerf. And so, they're like, oh my God, they're buffing brand. And you can already, imagine that this is going to be if I were to read Reddit, which I'm not going to anymore, it's yep, they're buffing brand. That's crazy. But this is the kind of thing that's a quality of life thing. Probably should have been there in the first place. And, we're going to put that in there. So, yeah. By the way, this is about how long it takes me to get to the halfway point of my walk. So, yeah. But yeah, another example of a change is that in set 13, we had added 2 more components baseline to the game. 1 more at stage 2 and 1 more at stage 3. And that made sense, especially because it felt like so few games had so few items with set 13 that we wanted to make sure a lot of comps that required 2 carries, you could actually at least get 1 or 2 items on your secondary carry. But obviously with the hacks, the amount of resources have gone up, generally on average. Now, not near to the degree that we saw the exaggeratory people react to the 14.3 notes, but there are more resources, right? Let's not pretend that there aren't more resources. So we're lowering that again. We're actually undoing the set 13 change, which was risky to begin with. And this is such an interesting one. This is another example of how do I put this? When people are doing their analysis of a design decision, they often only look at the trade-offs, but not necessarily the repercussions of said trade-off. For example, let's talk about if the game has too many resources. What does that mean, right? On the positive side, I saw a really good post in Frodin's Discord. On the positive side, what that means is the variance actually goes down, right? If you have, let's exaggerate and say 500 gold, your ability to hit your reroll comp or your ability to go 8 and find your 4 cost carries goes up. You will more consistently be able to hit those things. That is a truth. But the trade-off is that you have to feel like you're high rolling, because if you somehow still don't hit, you will always feel much weaker in general. Now, on the flip side, if resources are low, the skill expression becomes higher, but so does the variance, right? The variance of the game goes up pretty significantly. Some people are going to hit their, if instead of 500 gold, you only have 20 gold at 8. Some people are going to hit their 2-star 4 cost and you're not, and it's going to feel bad, right? But in isolation, those are the pros and cons of those two options. But which one is actually quantifiably better or worse is the actual discussion you need to be having. But instead, it just kind of comes down to whichever one is active right now, I will explain the trade-off of the other. And that doesn't really get you to a solution. So generally with these things, in these trade-offs, we have to look at that pro and con. And, one of the harder things to admit is that in TFT, if you give a player 20 gold or 500 gold, and again, I'm being exaggeratory here, they will have more fun with the 500 gold. That's just the truth. If anything proves that, it's Chonk's treasure. So our goal is to find that line where the game is still competitive and still hardcore and, good decision making and skill expressive without giving too many resources. And from what I've seen on live and playing the game, is that about 70% of games are actually fine on live right now where they are. There's a good amount of games that's just like, it's a standard game. Annie encounter, pretty standard orbs, no problem. Maybe even a gold orb, or maybe one random carousel gets hacked, or a split encounter, not so bad. But the ceiling right now, the ceiling is intense. There was, I think, one video where I saw somebody got a prismatic orb off their PvE round, and then they make a copy of the PvE round and got a second prismatic orb. And it was like, that's a little much. By the way, did you know something that didn't get announced because I wasn't around to announce it? The second PvE encounter has been disabled for like a week. That encounter had some issues, and so we ended up having to micro patch and disable it. So you have not seen the duplicate PvE round since like the second day of the patch. But yeah, that got micro patched a while ago. Anyway, the ceiling games are a bit much, right? The triple prismatic into gold orb into tome carousel. Our ceiling right now is a bit too high. And so I think longer term, what we're going to need to do is create a situation where we understand the ceiling that we want to have and how rare those are supposed to be. Still allow them. But we want to make sure that they're a little less common than they are right now. And it's such an interesting thing, because even me as a player, this is player hat on, not designer hat. Like, I hate the Annie encounter, because I'm like, oh, this is just another bedge game where I'm going through the motions. Whereas a triple prismatic game is like, ooh, time to experience something I don't normally get to. Another example of this is like, we have all these cool black market augments that only appear on 2-1. Things like Cruel Pact or Pirates or Dominance. Really good augments. But the appearance rate of a hacked 2-1 augment on a prismatic encounter that is hacked and then chooses the category black market is already so low that the sample size of every 2-1 black market augment in our data is like so non-existent. So it's hard to even understand which black market augments are OP given the lack of sample size. And so, I can't use the actual numbers of games, but to give you an idea, something like Cruel Pact is picked about 0.1% as often as Portable Forge. In terms of sample size, we're talking like 1,000x as often. So, that's another thing that's going to happen next patches. We're going to increase that a little bit. Now, it's only a small amount. Because, for example, if I told you we're doubling the amount of times 2-1 black market augments can appear, okay, well, 1 in 1,000 over Portable Forge becomes 1 in 500 over Portable Forge. It's not going to change that much. But, at least hopefully people actually get to experience some of those really fun augments. I didn't come with questions today, so if I'm just rambling on about topics, and again, give me feedback about this format. Let me know what you think. But rambling on, that's one of the other things I want to talk about at some point is augments, because man, augments have become the richest, most interesting design space in our entire game. When you say, hey, designer, I need you to make a 2-cost ranged AD champion. There's only so many variants of that you can do, right? You have the auto attacker that like self buffs, the auto attacker with a light spell, the spellcaster version, stuff like that. How many targets do they hit? Are they single target? Are they big cast, small cast, etc.? But there's only so many versions of that you can make. But augments, if I say, hey, I need you to make a 2-1 gold augment, man, there is an infinite possibility space there. The team right now has been working on augments for the next set. It's just like, man, the amount of creativity you can put in that space is so interesting. But, and this is one of the challenges, is that a lot of people look at those augments and they say, these create narrow spots. And when you look at augment design, right, even something simple, like let's say we made the most simple, basic augment that said, your team gains 25% attack speed. That's it, a simple augment. Well, even that augment inherently goes, okay, well, if you take that, you're probably playing 4 marksmen, right? Our pro players will take a basic augment like that and disseminate it down to the optimal decision with this augment is to play this, right? You don't play Bruiser Boombot. You don't play Street Demon because they don't take advantage of it as much as 4 marksmen. And so, if such a basic augment is getting narrowed down, but the designer needs to create an augment that is interesting enough on 2-1 without completely closing off other play paths for the rest of the game, it's an interesting challenge. Now, an example of good here is like item grab bag, right? Item grab bag just gives you a random item, could be anything. But even the output of item grab bag could narrow you down a path, right? If you get Morello out of that, or if you get Deathblade out of that, those are 2 very different outputs. And so, again, the challenge here is like coming up with an interesting augment that doesn't necessarily dictate your path immediately, but gives you an interesting challenge or a hoop to jump through. And I was thinking about this, and a really good example I gave to one of my designers was, imagine a silver augment that said, gain 2 swords. That is a really elegant, interesting option. Because when you get 2 swords, that can be Shojin Gunblade, that could be Deathblade, that could be IE, that could be Edge of Night BT, right? That is an example where the power is very balanced. It's 2 components for a silver. But what those components are, they allow you the decision making where if you're like looking at 2-1 and you're like, man, I really don't want swords right now, you can pass on it. But getting those swords doesn't lock you into a specific output. And that's really important. And so again, as we continue to make more augments, because augments continue to be one of the most rich design spaces. It's finding that elegance while also creating new experiences, right? Because for every gain 2 swords, you need a birthday present, or you need, an invested or something like that. It's something that players will have a lot of fun with. So, yeah. All right. We're hitting the half-hour mark. My walk's almost done. I'm getting to the second uphill part that's really hard and I get out of breath. So I'm going to end this video here for now. And like I said, let me know what you guys think. We're going to open a Discord channel where you guys can ask questions. And I will take some of those questions, and each morning on my walk, I will try to respond to those and give them the attention they deserve. But yeah, let me know. All right, that's going to do it for me for now. I'm going to finish up my walk, and then it's Mother's Day tomorrow, so got stuff to do for that. But yeah, all right. Until next time, take it easy.